family.
So we're ready to begin. We have our candidates in place here, so I'm going to start with some introductory remarks. That's a lot, well, for you and also for when we put this on YouTube and broadcast it on TV. And then we'll get into the questions themselves. My name is Marguerite Herman. I'm with the Cheyenne League of Women Voters, and this is the second legislative forum that we've been doing. Last week we did House Districts 10, 12, and 44. Tonight we're doing House District 7 and Senate District 5. And District 7 is embedded in the Senate District, so theoretically this will be of interest to the same voters, the two different offices that represent them. Next, and just to let you know, in 2 weeks we're going to have here a forum for the City Council. Many candidates running for Ward 3. That ought to be an exciting race. And then in August at the County Fair at the Frontier Park, on August 6th, we will cover in very rapid fashion all the county offices, and then 3 days later on the 9th, we'll be doing two statewide races, the ones that no one else seems to be covering, the state auditor and state treasurer. So those are upcoming. They will all be posted on YouTube. The one from last week is posted on YouTube. The Cheyenne League of Women Voters, we have a YouTube channel. Those are already up. And just to let you know, those forums from last week will be broadcast on the public access channel for Spectrum, and I'll give you those dates and times now. So it's channel 192. Some people prefer to watch it on a TV instead of online, and it will play Wednesday and Friday, both at 6 p.m. So the July 18th and July 20th at 6 p.m., and then on Saturday, the 21st at 11 a.m. So many opportunities to view that, and then again we will post this, and similarly in all the other forums we're doing. Okay, so down to the specifics. Just only to let you know, early voting has begun, so you can go down to the county courthouse and you can cast your ballot now. Or you can do an absentee ballot by mail. If you have any questions, the county clerk's office online and at the office has all the information about how to register, how to vote. So I'll get to you tonight. So the League of Women Voters is just a little bit of background. We're a nonpartisan organization. We're open to everyone, and we work to help people get involved in their government and to be informed and then to vote. We hope these forums help provide some information, but we urge the candidates also to check out the candidates, we urge voters to check out the candidates' materials and also contact them if you have follow-up questions. The Wyoming League of Women Voters has written a list of 5 principles for campaign integrity. We hope those also help voters evaluate candidates in their campaigns. And we also have this handy brochure about choosing a candidate. And it's just sort of guidelines on how to evaluate candidates. And it's very nonspecific. We don't support candidates, individual candidates, or parties. It's just sort of a guide for how to evaluate candidates. And actually, we distributed these to the candidates earlier with our invitation, I believe, and we are going to ask them to weigh in on these as when they have their closing statements, if they choose their position, whether they support it or not, and how the evening's going to go. There'll be 2 minutes opening that they can use to introduce themselves, why they're running, why you should vote for them. They'll have 2 minutes to close, and they can use it any way they want to add to something they've said before, maybe to open up a new line, summarize what they're doing. And then the questions that we'll try to get through 5 or 6 questions tonight. We have 45 minutes, and those will be a minute and a half, with an additional afterwards 30 seconds that they can take optional to add, to rebut, or respond to what the other person has said, to amplify their own position. Again, it's an optional 30 seconds to use any way they want. In addition, we have, Mary here has some cards and pencils, and if you have a question that comes to you, and get a card from her, and we'll write down your question, and we'll try to get to questions as we can during the evening. House district people serve two-year terms, and there are no term limits for that office. The Senate district is 4 years, and again, no term limits for that. So I guess we'll go ahead and start. Oh, and Chris is going to help time. She will hold up little time cards to let you know as time lapses, and we hope it's not distracting, but it does let you fair warning when we need to be wrapping up, and we have a timer that beeps when it's done. So it's a pretty it's a fairly obnoxious reminder when your time is out, I have to say. So to get going here this evening, I guess we'll start, and we will alternate who starts. And when you got the email to come tonight, you got we asked you to think about three problems, three issues with state government or that could be facing the legislature. So that's going to be the first question. You can go ahead and do it in your intro remarks, but just to let you know that we're going to be getting to that. That's the first question out of the box. But now let's start with the 2-minute introduction, and we'll start with John Little. And just let you know, these are both Republicans, so the primary is going to be the election. In this case, there is no Democrat running. So, Mr. Little, if you want to start with 2-minute introduce yourself to the voters and the people in the audience tonight.
Thank you, Marguerite, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this. Well, I've served this community as a teacher, high school principal, and most recently as superintendent of schools. My wife, Brenda, and I have 3 children and 4 grandchildren that live in Cheyenne and one that lives in another community. Our children benefited from an excellent education. Like others in our community, we want to see the same for our grandchildren. I have previously served as an officer of the Wyoming National Guard. This experience, as well as working in education, gives me a unique perspective regarding the needs of our civilian and military families. I've worked with the legislature for over 20 years, advocating for quality, equitable education for all Wyoming students. My experience in running the largest school district in Wyoming, leading an organization of 2,400 employees and 14,000 students, has given me an opportunity to problem solve with large groups of people with having diverse interests. We need leadership in the state legislature more than we ever have. We need legislators to advocate for our rights right here, right now. We need legislators to speak up for our community. Government workers are a primary driver of our local economy, with state, county, city, our community college, and school district comprising the largest groups of employees in our community. Yet, they get criticized and are often blamed when our economy takes a downturn. We need to change this conversation to long-term solutions. I am running to give a voice to these issues and to provide leadership to work with others to get it done. It is my desire to continue giving to our community through public service. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now Sue Wilson, and just to mention, she is the incumbent seeking re-election this term. And if you go ahead and start, 2 minutes.
Sure. Thanks, Ms. Herman, and thanks also to the League for hosting us. I have to say this is a very nice room. I hope the Capitol looks as good when we're done with it. I was first elected to House District 7 6 years ago, and at the time I wanted to focus on healthcare, education, and economic development, and those are still the issues that I am focusing on. I've lived in the district since 2001 when my husband retired from the military and we came back to Cheyenne, which is where he had grown up. So we have 2 grown children. My daughter's married. We have a 2-year-old granddaughter. I have a Labrador retriever, and unfortunately this summer I have a vegetable garden full of weeds. So as a military spouse, I end up with a rather checkered career. I started off as a healthcare administrator, which is what my master's degree is in. Then I taught social studies and Spanish in a private school, and now I have my own translation business. So a lot of times I say that I should really be the poster child for the governor's broadband initiative, because the internet is what enables me to reach clients all around the world. And so all those 3 things gave me the background to work on those 3 issues that I've really focused on: healthcare, education, and economic development. So my vision for the future of Wyoming is to educate our kids, to make sure folks have good paying jobs, to keep building healthy communities, and really for all of us to be able to step out the door in the morning and look around and say, wow, Wyoming is such a great place to live. So that's what I've been working on for the past 6 years, and I hope that I can continue to work towards those goals.
Okay. Thank you very much. And now we'll go ahead and start with Ms. Wilson with the questions. And as I mentioned before, that question about the 3 issues and your response to them, a minute and a half, and then again, there'll be a 30-second rebuttal when it's over. So thank you.
Sure thing. 3 minutes or 1 minute and a half is pretty short to do three issues, but I mean, there's more than three. We have to multitask. First thing, obviously, is solving the budget problem. We've cut state agencies 16% from what the total budget was 10 years ago. We still have challenges with education funding, although we actually made pretty good progress in the last session, I think, in spite of the press's focus on the shortfall. We diverted a number of our revenue streams from savings to education funding, although if we still have challenges in the energy sector, we are going to have a revenue gap. Second issue, I would say, is increasing access to primary care and mental health services. We've got challenges educating and recruiting healthcare providers. We've got high costs for healthcare and insurance. And then what I call service silos that really hamper care and add to the cost. So I have sponsored several bills that attempt to address those issues, and I'll keep working on that. And then the third issue that I think we need to focus on is informing the citizens. The people need and deserve a better understanding of the budget and the revenue, the services that we provide, the trade-offs. I've had people ask me why we don't use the rainy day fund. And when I tell them that we have used 27% of the rainy day fund in the last 4 years, they have no idea. So the issues that we have to address, the decisions can't be made by one committee or 90 legislators and a governor, but people can't make good decisions if they don't know what's going on. So I think that really is the third issue.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Little, minute and a half.
Thank you. Well, no big surprise. I think the number one on the list is to balance our financial needs while maintaining an acceptable level of service in our state. We still have opportunities, I think, to look at some efficiencies and redundancies in government. Not unlike the federal government, our state government does put out a lot of red tape, and there's lots of reporting. And I can tell you for a fact, in the school district, we do reports that no one ever looks at, and that is a gross waste of time. And I did suggest to the legislative committee last year that they do a study and involve those people at those levels to see what kinds of things that are repetitive reports that we don't need to spend the time doing that. Secondly is to help create a robust economy where we no longer export our children to other states. We are in last place in the nation in the number of workers they had to leave to find employment. During this last year, I had an opportunity to serve on Forward Greater Cheyenne Committee, working with community and economic development strategies. We looked at a lot of case studies from other states, and I think we can learn from that in terms of diversifying our economy. And of course, the last one will be no big surprise to people: maintaining a quality, equitable education system. The state spent millions of dollars on consultants, and I think we need to very closely monitor what we do with that.
Okay, thank you. Does either one of you want to take 30 seconds to add or to respond?
No.
Oh, okay. We will move on to the questions the league has written. And this has to do, this is something we didn't ask last week because it's sort of coming to a head, but county officials in the legislature are wrestling with the problem of replacing millions of dollars of outdated voting equipment. Wyoming county clerks have a proposal to use mail-in ballots, much like absentee voting, while maintaining a physical voting location for those who prefer that. They say they can scale up current safeguards to secure the elections, as 22 other states do. Would you support the county clerk's proposal? And we'll start with Mr. Little this time.
Thank you. Yeah, I absolutely would support that. In looking at what other states have done, they've really increased their participation rate, and they have found other ways to make sure that that's secure and make sure that, the paper ballots are coming from the appropriate people and verifying that. I think it's a great idea. And what's the concerns that we have about our whole voting in this nation, I think it's less likely to have somebody come in and hack a paper ballot. And like I said, it's increased voting in those 22 states.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Wilson.
I have not actually made a decision on that. That's something that I really look forward to hearing from the county clerks on in testimony, as far as how it would work out across the various districts in the state. One of the things that I'm a little bit concerned about actually is the earlier and earlier people vote, the less and less opportunity they have to go to forums like this. And so I wouldn't want us to get too far ahead, because there's a lot of times where I'm at a person's door and they say, well, I already voted. Well, I haven't met any of other people yet. So I really, I always am willing to hear what the county clerks have to say. We've got great county clerks across the state. And so I would rely upon their input.
Okay, thank you. Does either one of you want to take another 30 seconds to amplify or respond?
I don't have follow-up.
All right, very good. So getting back shortly, just briefly to education funding, since it seems to be, it's a major issue that will be with us for a while. It comes to districts now as a block grant. There's a guarantee. In that balance between legislative spending control and local control for school districts, where do you stand? Do you think it's good now? Do you think one or the other, or do you think the legislature should take a bigger hand in being prescriptive about how money is spent? And we'll start with Ms. Wilson this time.
Sure. Well, there's a lot of material in that question. And I think one thing I just want to make sure that folks realize is that the Wyoming school funding system only came out from court jurisdiction 10 years ago. And if you're not involved in education, a lot of times people don't actually realize that. So the state Supreme Court in the Campbell and Washakie decisions pointed out that based on the Constitution, the legislature is responsible for education funding. So we can't go back to an idea of total local control, because I think that would suggest total local funding, which the court said was not constitutional. So just setting that as a beginning, I totally support the concept of equity across the state. I think children in poorer school districts should have the same opportunity for a quality education as students in wealthier districts like Laramie County 1. But as far as the attitude, at the state level, we're always asking the feds to give us our money in block grants, Medicaid or transportation or whatever. And so it makes sense for the classroom decisions to be made at the local level. But I want to just say to folks out in TV land then it's on the local voters to monitor and give feedback to the school boards. And I think that's a really key part of that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Little.
Well, I'm certainly in favor of the block grant, as the consultants have put it together, and the legislature did approve. And a big part of the reason is, as I talk to my peers around the state and other superintendents, their needs are quite different than ours. And an example, it's the model doesn't fund school resource officers, but we're more of an urban environment, and that's a necessity in our community. To maintain safety, and so it's very important that we have the flexibility to do that. And the other thing I'll state, our school board members are elected at large in the community, so they represent not just an area. And I think all people that are elected understand, the broader perspective of serving all the people in a community. But they're elected from the entire community, and they are closest to the people that are receiving the service. So I think it's critical that it remain a block grant, so you have some flexibility. Obviously I think it's good, for school districts to take a look at, how they're spending and how that compares to the grant, and knowing the reasons why. And I've been asked by legislators, why are you spending more money here or there? And we ought to be able to defend that in terms of why we're doing the things that we are doing.
Okay. Do any of you want another 30 seconds?
No.
You're very concise tonight. Excellent. Considering Wyoming's high rate of tobacco use and the public cost of tobacco-related illnesses and death, would you support a tax on cigarettes at a level to discourage young people from starting to smoke? And we've been told that level is at least $1 per pack increase. And this time we'll start with Mr. Little.
I would. We have one of the lowest tobacco rates. Our tobacco rates are similar to the states that actually produce the tobacco. I've always wondered, why are we doing that? I understand why they do it. They have a product they're trying to sell, but several years ago, Senator Thomas was visiting Central High School when I was a principal, and we were in assembly, and he asked him about smoking. And the student said, and he said, what would it take to have those in this room that don't smoke to stop? And, lots of hands went up, and they said, raise the price. And and I thought, well, there's a lot of wisdom out of the mouth of those kids. And so I think, certainly it would be worth taking a look at.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Wilson.
Obviously, reducing tobacco use would be a good thing. I mean, it's bad for you. If those of you out there watching haven't figured that out, I'll just tell you, it's bad for you. I am cautious of unintended consequences when we try to use tax policy for social engineering. You can order, if you didn't know, you can order cigarettes online, and a lot of it doesn't even come from the United States. It comes from, the first one at the top of my Google search was from Europe, I think. So, you can order stuff online, you can buy it on the reservation, you can buy it on base here in Cheyenne. So, unfortunately, people are really good at tax evasion. So it sounds like a really great method, and to be honest, I have voted for that sometimes, and sometimes I have voted against it, because it's hard to know how to balance the tax evasion problem with the public health good, which is really clear. I know that we've been successful at driving down tobacco use because we're getting less money into the tobacco trust fund, and unfortunately that is money that we're using for substance abuse programs. So I know that it's driving down by education. If we could just figure out how to convince teenagers that hacking up black stuff isn't cool, we'd be so far ahead. So I'm on the fence on that one, just because of the unintended consequences. Clearly, the public health benefits are outstanding.
Okay, thank you. Follow-up, anyone? Opportunity? Nope. Okay. The Wyoming legislature has exempted itself from state open meeting laws, so committees can meet behind closed doors. Should the legislature voluntarily subject itself to the open meeting laws that local governments have to comply with? And we'll start with Ms. Wilson.
So transparency is really important. I mean, I said in my introduction that people can't make good decisions if they don't know what's going on. And part of what the legislature does has to be input from the people. So I feel that's really important. In the House last session, and I'll get to the open meetings, but in the House last session, I was the floor manager of the bill that increased live streaming for interim legislative meetings, and that passed successfully. I'm on several interim committee meetings. There are committees that are working to simplify the budget, to improve our website, come up with ways to help citizens better understand what's going on. I have a website that I use to inform voters about what's happening. I do a lot of PowerPoint presentations in the community. So that's all part of my effort and our effort to inform folks. One of the challenges, I think, during session, of course, the meetings are all open. I think one of the challenges is at the end of session, the conference committees probably. And one of the challenges there is just the space and the time, especially we're in the Jonah building. There's not always, you're running around half of the time, half of you don't know where the other people even are, how to provide notice. So it's not working as well as it should. And it's frustrating to the legislators too. So hopefully when we get back to the Capitol, we can have some more space and better scheduling. Certainly the meeting should be open to the public. And I'll just say, if the governor has to arm wrestle folks at the end of the session, then I'm sure he or she will appreciate a public group to do it in front of.
With maybe stands with cheering, perhaps.
Cheering,
Yeah,
that's right.
Cheerleaders.
Cheering stands.
Okay, very good.
And tomatoes.
Yes, right. So, Mr. Lynn, do you want me to repeat the question, or are you?
I think I'm familiar with the
Okay.
question. I can go ahead and answer that.
Okay.
I'm certainly in favor of transparency, and I've worked for a school board pretty directly the last 20 years where we did not have opportunities to go into closed sessions unless it was something for executive session. And of course, even with the legislative body, I think those things need to be kept, and that's to deal with personnel or if you're buying property. And part of the reason people ask me, well, why should property be something you consider? Well, if you talk about building a school or a state building someplace, and the community becomes aware of it before you've kind of negotiated some of that, the price can go way high very quickly. So that's some of the reason. But of course, the decisions have always had to be made in public. But I think it's worked well, and I think transparency is good, and we hear from our constituency. So I'm definitely in favor of transparency and not having closed door sessions unless it's a personnel matter kind of issue.
Okay, thank you. And it's sort of a brief follow-up. I think the meetings conference committees that were closed, there were some tricky back and forth, maybe horse trading kind of thing going on that I think people thought was be most successful if not in the public eye. Does that make a difference? The fact that people think that the glare of publicity holds up a meeting of the minds, and I guess we'll just real briefly, Mr. Little, does that mitigate, does that excuse going behind closed doors? What do you think?
I think you can still negotiate things publicly, and I mean, and there's certain ways you can do that. And, the consensus building, I think, is very important, and I think there's things that the legislative body could do to help mitigate those kinds of things. That it's okay to have those tough discussions. And I remember Senator Ross telling me, making legislation's like making sausage, kind of an ugly process, but in the end, you get there and you improve things for the community. And I think it's okay for the public to see that, to see the struggles, because we all struggle in whatever decisions we're making in our families and our own jobs. So I don't think it would stop good legislation.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Wilson.
I think if people suspect that there's horse trading, that's a detriment to the whole process and the outcome. And I think that I would in favor of things to be open, because I think if you can't defend the position that you're taking and how you arrive at it, then maybe it's not a good position to be in.
All right, thank you very much. And I have a couple of questions left, but one from the audience is as Republicans, and we'll be starting with Mr. Little this time, do you support all 19 items in the 2018 platform of the Wyoming Republican Party? And I guess it presumes you know what all of those 19 positions are, and I don't have access to those, so I guess the first part of that would be, are you familiar with the platform, and do you, is there any piece of the platform that you would diverge with? And so we're going to start with Mr. Little.
Okay, well, that's somewhat of a difficult question for me. I am somewhat I would just say a little familiar with some of the platform items, but I can tell you that as I think about people's support or non-support for items, and you can see that in the legislative body as they debate issues, you can see a whole continuum of where people come from, and I think just taking carte blanche of I agree with all of these things. I mean, when it was developed, I'm sure there were give and take in terms of how people